I do not ask about a nominee's personal opinions. What matters is not a judge's political views, but whether they can set aside those views to do what the law and the Constitution require. I am pleased to say that I have found, without doubt, such a person.
Well, there you go. That was Donald Trump tonight, trumpeting his latest nominee for the U.S. Supreme Court. And the president's introduction notwithstanding, Brett Kavanaugh was clearly chosen with an eye to adding conservative heft to the bench. So the question tonight, what will be the impact on people in the United States and even here in Canada? Our expert panel follows the court very closely. Mark Joseph Stern is the legal affairs correspondent with Slate magazine. He's in Washington, right in the heart of the action. Christine Harrington is a professor of politics at New York University. She is also in Washington tonight. And Elie Mystal is the executive editor of AboveTheLaw.com. He joins us from New York. And Elie, I feel compelled to start with you. I know you're not one to mince words, so, have at it. What is your gut instinct about the nomination of Brett Kavanaugh?
Yeah, this is the worst of all possible worlds, right? I will leave it to Kavanaugh's former clerk, who said that if a president was interested in overturning Roe, there could be no better choice than Brett Kavanaugh. So let's start there. Roe and abortion rights in America are clearly under threat as of now. But I think this pick was made not actually as a litmus test for abortion rights. I think the litmus test here is that Kavanaugh has written extensively and powerfully, basically saying that the president cannot be indicted while he's the president. Obviously, Donald Trump is under, 8,000 different kinds of investigations. And Kavanaugh is the guy who's going to say, no, Robert Mueller, you cannot indict a sitting president. And that's probably the fifth vote that Trump needs to hang on to his job. So I think that, as usual, Trump was more self-interested than ideological with this pick.
Boy, Elie, I wish you'd speak your mind. Mark, you seem a little pensive. What do you think?
I generally agree with Elie's assessment. I would add that this is great news for deregulators in the Trump White House. One of the chief goals of the Trump administration has been to deregulate the banking industry, the energy industry, the financial industry, as much as possible. And Brett Kavanaugh is extremely skeptical of regulatory power broadly and also of the bureaucrats in D.C. who are tasked with implementing regulations. He has voted repeatedly to strike down laws maintaining the independence of agencies like the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. He has voted to strike down regulations limiting pollution and fossil fuels. He is a quote-unquote pro-business, anti-regulation choice, and that is going to make a huge faction of the Republican Party extremely happy this evening.
Christine, given everything we're hearing here, is this a lock? I mean, we are talking about this as if it is a done deal, but is there a chance that Brett Kavanaugh could actually have a hard time in the confirmation hearing?
Well, if we pay attention to what the opposition has talked about, there could possibly be some rough going. Not so much in the hearings, but rather the backroom dickering with other members of the Senate, particularly, of course, the two women senators who have expressed support for women's reproductive privacy and may or may not support this nominee given his record, as Elie noted. On the matter of deregulation, I'm afraid the Republicans will be just, rolling over and thrilled, as Mark has already pointed out.
Okay, so I, as an outsider here, I know people have been hanging on the name, but it just seems in a way that you're talking about different degrees of conservatism here. Does the fact that it's actually Brett Kavanaugh actually matter? Mark?
Well, I think all of the top shortlist candidates were definitely very conservative. I think that Kavanaugh is about as far to the right as you could get. Arguably, another shortlister, Amy Coney Barrett, was even farther to the right. But Kavanaugh has this staunchly conservative record that will please and appease as many Republicans as you could hope for. I mean, in addition to deregulation, as Elie said, he's clearly anti-abortion. He wrote this very condescending, paternalistic decision allowing the government to block an undocumented minor from terminating her pregnancy. He's extremely pro-gun. He would have struck down laws here in the District of Columbia that limit private citizens' access to assault weapons. He's almost certainly going to oppose marriage equality and gay rights under an originalist view of the Constitution. So I think it does matter because there were candidates on that short list like Tom Hardiman, who currently sits on the Third Circuit, who were a little bit more of an unknown there and who might have had some room to drift to the left a bit, to have a more moderate vote. Kavanaugh is, he can be a bomb thrower. He's very, very far to the right. He's not afraid to tone it down, or he doesn't want to tone it down. He's not afraid to stay as far out there as he wants so he can get results for the right-wing cause that he so obviously supports.
Elie, how you doing?
Yeah, I think Mark's right. Like, look, you're right. There were all there. If you care about rights, whether they be civil or gender equality, they were all bad choices. But Kavanaugh has a particular way of, he does one thing, for instance, that I really cannot stand as a journalist. He believes in what a lot of people call weaponized free speech. That means that somehow your speech, if you're kind of saying the right conservative things, becomes more important than somebody else's right to not be discriminated against. And I think so like, there are different ways, let's take gay rights. There are different ways of crushing gay rights that don't do as much damage as Kavanaugh will do when he basically decides that homophobia is free speech. He's going to twist things in a certain way that's going to make it kind of particularly painful to watch these decisions that, as Mark says, all four of these shortlisters probably would have come down on the same size. The way Kavanaugh's going to get there is going to be real gross.
So, I mean, we're watching this as Canadians here, as your neighbors, and I know we could fall down the rabbit hole of analyzing American politics and the impact on Americans, but a lingering curiosity here is we know that the border is porous politically, socially, culturally. So if we can start with each one of you, what's your instinct about what the impact might be on a country like this one? Christine?
Well, I think in terms of expanding executive power with this nominee and solidifying more authority in the executive branch, that will have impact, not just for Canada, but elsewhere, and of course, clearly here within the United States. I think that the comments that we've already heard regarding his dismissal of the idea that a sitting president can be indicted bode pretty scary with respect to restraints that can be placed on this president, such as the ongoing Mueller investigation, as well as other types of activity. And that's not just this nominee, but we had a hint of that in the Muslim ban decision that just was affirmed, surprisingly, by the Supreme Court, with the view that a reasonable president may be able to ban based on national security, despite the reality of the remarks, the racist remarks that Trump has made about Muslims. So in terms of restraining, checking the executive, that's not in the cards here. And we saw a bit of that, of course, in the Muslim ban, but the direction of this nominee and the leadership he may take in partnership with Alito, Justice Alito in particular, will be moving it further in the direction of there being no judicial check.
All right, all of you, thank you very much. We appreciate your time.
Okay.
Thank you.
So there's been a lot of discussion about abortion tonight, and there's a reason for that. It's because the United States public is deeply divided over abortion. The most recent Gallup polling from early May shows that 48% identify as pro-choice. 48% identify as pro-life. That's the language used in the polling. Half continue to say abortion should be legal in some circumstances, but slightly more respondents say abortion is morally wrong than those who say it's morally acceptable.